Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the pre-launch press conference for the Falcon 9 and COTS 1 mission. And here to discuss the Falcon 9 and the upcoming mission is Gwen Shotwell, president of SpaceX, Hawthorne, California. Alan Lindenmoyer, manager of the COTS program from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Phil McAllister, acting director of the Commercial Spaceflight Development Program at headquarters in Washington. And Mike McAleenan, the Falcon 9 launch weather officer from the 45th Weather Squadron, Department of the Air Force, Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
Good afternoon.
And we'll begin first with comments from SpaceX and Gwen Shotwell. Gwen?
Thanks, George. Well, I'm happy to be here. For my opening remarks here, I'm going to assume you know a bit about SpaceX and the COTS mission that we're about to execute. But let me just do a couple of quick highlights. This is the first flight of an active Dragon spacecraft and only the second flight of the SpaceX Falcon 9 launch vehicle. The first Falcon 9 maiden flight was a success. The target orbit was 250 kilometers circular, 34.5 degrees inclination. We hit a 249.1 by 253.1 injection at a 34.49 degree inclination. So it was a bullseye. We're hoping for another one here upcoming. As status, on Saturday, our second attempt to do the static fire, we were successful, and so we were proceeding for a launch first thing tomorrow morning, about 9:05. So when I flew last night out of L.A. on the red-eye, I assumed we'd be launching tomorrow. As it turns out, in the final review of the closeout photos this morning, we found some indications on a second stage nozzle that we are spending some time investigating. We're doing some tests and some root cause analysis right now, but it looks like the first attempt of this flight is a no earlier than Thursday, if things look good. If we do put on a new second stage nozzle, the day we're shooting for Friday or Saturday flight of this week. But I don't want to take that too much off track. I would like to still go through the mission, the highlights. We'll start with the countdown. Begins at about T-minus 2 hours and 35 minutes. That's with the chief engineer polling the stations. The terminal count begins at T-minus 10 minutes, and we run through a number of operations on the vehicle. Liftoff, obviously T0. The first stage shutdown, which is main engine cutoff, occurs about 2 minutes and 58 seconds into flight. About 4 seconds later, by the way, I have all this in the press kit. You'll have all these details, so you don't have to remember any of this. I certainly wouldn't. About 4 seconds later, the first stage separates. The second stage engine starts about 3 minutes and 9 seconds after liftoff. We go through a series of operations on orbit with a planned reentry almost 2 orbits later, and water landing at T plus 3 hours and 19 minutes. That's all I had prepared for this. I'm looking forward to your questions. Actually, let me first, I wanted to show you a video that we had shooting this morning. The Falcon 9 was vertical on the pad, so it is pretty real. So if you can go ahead and roll the video. It's about a minute long. I think the only audio on the video is the wind noise. Great. George?
All right. Thank you, Gwen. And now to Alan Lindenmoyer, the manager of the COTS program from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Alan?
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Gwen. Well, it is certainly great to see the Dragon and the Falcon on the pad. I should say a word about our program, the nature of our program. We started the program in 2006, and it was an experiment in a new way of doing business with private industry. And we weren't exactly sure how it was going to turn out, but here we are today with a new launch vehicle on the pad and ready to complete its first demonstration flight. So it is certainly very, very exciting to see the progress and to be here for that. Started in 2006, and instead of our traditional approach where we laid out a series of detailed requirements and issued a proposal for prime contract for developing a capability with a rather extensive list of requirements, we took a different approach and said, let's talk about capabilities, general capabilities, what we would like to see in new space transportation capabilities. And then NASA just provided top-level goals and objectives to the companies so that they could have maximum opportunity to innovate and be free to optimize their systems. So we did that, and SpaceX was offered one of those partnership agreements with NASA in August of 2006, and NASA took on the role of a lead investor then. Instead of a customer for our prime contract requirements, we became a lead investor, and we also are a technical consultant to SpaceX to offer assistance when needed and when requested, and become more of a partner in this activity. We strongly encourage innovation, hopefully leading to reduced costs to the access of space, which of course we hope to open new markets and then make space accessible to many more people in the future, and as well as leading to economic growth for the United States. NASA would become a consumer of services then, instead of a traditional customer for our contracts. And in fact, in December of 2008, with the progress that was being made under the COTS demonstration programs, in a completely separate activity, NASA awarded contracts to Orbital Sciences and SpaceX for the resupply of the International Space Station. So we are very much looking forward to completing this demonstration and then beginning those services, which was worth $1.6 billion, and SpaceX is on contract for 12 missions to certify the station over the next few years, to service the station over the next few years. In our program, we measure progress and success by incremental milestones. We laid out a series of 22 milestones over the term of the agreement for a maximum payment of up to $278 million, and we have paid SpaceX $253 million for the 17 milestones they've completed to date. They have 5 left. This first demonstration COTS mission is the next milestone, and we're certainly looking forward to that. So SpaceX has done great work over the years. We certainly wish you the best of luck and success in this demonstration mission.
Thank you, Alan. And now to Phil McAllister, the acting director of the Commercial Spaceflight Development Office at NASA headquarters in Washington. Phil.
Thank you. This is an extremely exciting milestone for both NASA and SpaceX. We are getting closer to the time when we can successfully deliver cargo to the International Space Station, and I certainly want to congratulate SpaceX on the progress that they have made to date. We've got an extremely challenging year ahead with the remaining milestones, but getting this far, this fast, has been a remarkable achievement. So I do want to congratulate SpaceX. With the decision to extend the life of the International Space Station to 2020 and potentially beyond, and the imminent retirement of the Space Shuttle, cargo delivery services to the ISS has become more important than ever. So we are definitely looking forward to the day where we will have multiple redundant capabilities for ISS cargo transportation services. We're also looking forward to this program as one of the models that we're using in developing the Commercial Crew Program. NASA is planning on taking the next step with private industry to demonstrate this government private sector partnership, and the COTS program is definitely one of the models that we're using as an input, and we plan to leverage the lessons learned that Alan and his team have learned over the years and incorporate that into our planning for the Commercial Crew program. But I do want to stress with this coming up flight, this is a test flight. Space flight is very, very difficult, and history is any guide. There is undoubtedly going to be some anomalies as we go through the test program. That is what the test program is designed for, is to learn. From NASA's standpoint, if we get through this demonstration flight and we have a clear path to the second demonstration flight, we will have achieved a great success. So we definitely want to learn from this flight. We hope that everything is successful, but as if history is any guide, you're not going to have a completely completely successful test flight program. There's only so much you can learn from modeling and simulation and ground testing. Eventually you have to fly these systems, you have to flesh out and learn how they work in space and move on, get better, get smarter. But the key is, no matter how this test flight goes, NASA and SpaceX both are committed to the success of this program. We're committed to this partnership. So if there are any anomalies, we are going to learn from them, move forward, and continue to demonstrate these systems as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And now to Mike McAleenan, the Falcon 9 Launch Weather Officer from the 45th Weather Squadron. Mike?
Good afternoon. What a difference a day makes for the weather, huh? We had some cold air move in with the frontal boundary, and as you can see with the satellite, there's not a cloud to be looked for in the entire peninsula. We are seeing some cold air stratocumulus off the water, and that's really the only cloud cover to speak of. I don't think we're going to see much of a change over the next 2 or 3 days. Moving into the updated launch forecast, you can see we weren't sure 8th or 9th, but it looks like that the winds will start to diminish. We're looking for another breezy and cool day tomorrow, but by the time we get to Thursday, Friday time frame, we are looking for winds to lighten up, still be out of the northwest, 10 peak 15 or so. Temperatures will start to rebound into more Florida-like weather, and only a 10% chance of violation. And that would be if the winds are a bit more northerly or even northeasterly. That would cause some of those clouds that you saw just offshore to roll in, might violate a flight through precipitation constraint. Moving into the Atlantic for first stage recovery, you can see quite a bit of wave heights are out there right now. The ships are experiencing gale force winds and 15-foot seas, which would not allow recovery to take place. The good news is a couple of days slip and winds should start diminishing after today, and waves will follow. And for launch day, we're looking for waves to be down in the 7 to 9 foot range, which is right at the edge of the threshold for safe recovery of the first stage. So a couple days slip will help recover the first stage. On the Pacific side, more importantly for this mission, is the Dragon recovery, and looking like a much better conditions out in the Pacific. Temperatures are about the same. Water temps are about 10 degrees cooler, however, and waves there 9 to 11 feet, and they do drop off for Friday, after Friday, to maybe 7 to 8 feet. So recovery out there will be marginal, but they don't have the same constraints as they do on the Atlantic side. So just in summary, looks like we would have had a pretty good chance tomorrow, a little bit gustier and cooler conditions, but don't really see anything in the next 3 or 4 days that's going to hinder launch attempt from the weather perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. We're ready now for questions. Please be sure to give your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you. And we'll start here in the front with Jay.
Jay Barbary with NBC. I'm noticing that your launch inclination here is 34.5, I believe, instead of 51.6, which is the inclination to the space station. And I believe that takes you over into Northern Europe. I know you have FAA approval to launch. Does that include approval to launch over Europe? Because at 9 minutes, I believe, that traveling at 17,500 miles an hour, you could, under the worst set of circumstances, drop Dragon on Europe or close by or somewhere there. I don't have a line to go out here, but would you address that, please?
Sure. The license that we have with the FAA is comprehensive, and it covers all phases of flight. Absolutely, that's correct.
Now, well, if I can follow up, then while we have the microphone here. You were talking about 12 missions that you have under contract with NASA already. Are these 12 cargo delivery missions, not including any of the flights that you're doing here on test demonstration? Is it 3 test demonstration flights plus 12 going with cargo? And when do you expect, under the best circumstances, assuming that everything goes pretty well with your test, to be able to deliver your first cargo to the ISS?
Okay, there was a lot of questions there, but hopefully I'll get them all. The 12 flights under CRS are separate and distinct for the COTS flights. The original program plan had 3 demonstration flights. If we see success, we're going to look to try to attempt to get to the station on the second flight. But that's obviously decisions for a later day. I think there was another question in there.
Be carrying cargo on that second flight?
Possibly. Possibly we'll be carrying cargo. So we anticipate completing the ISS COTS missions next year and executing a cargo mission under the CRS contract as well.
So with Atlantis flying this summer with enough to take enough supplies to the space station for a year, then you're talking about summer 2012 that you might be able to start delivering?
No, next year, 2011.
2011.
2011 is
you
correct.
Could start delivering.
That's correct. Yeah, it's up to NASA to plan the manifest, but that's our plan.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Marcia?
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. Quick question for Ms. Shotwell, then a NASA question. Is there a cost attached to the upcoming flight?
A cost? Sure. You're asking, am I going to share that? Yes. Yeah, we don't really talk about costs at SpaceX. I can say that our pricing is on the web, and it does cover the cost of the goods sold, the cost of the operations, with some margin as well.
And for Mr. McAllister, do you believe that whether the flight goes good or bad can be a contributor to the anti-commercial forces out there? I mean, how important is it for this flight to succeed so you don't get all that questioning and debating and all that's been going on so far for so many months?
Right. That's a great point, and that's why I wanted to emphasize that this is a test flight. It is not in any way an indictment for or against the overall program if you have anomalies. We expect anomalies, and again, the purpose of the test flight is to learn. So as long as we're learning and we have a clear path for demonstration flight 2, we would consider that successful. We're not going to know until the end of the program if we've been ultimately successful in achieving the capability of delivering these services to ISS. But what we can say is, to date, this has been a remarkably successful program. And again, just to reemphasize my earlier comments, even if there is even if we have a bad day, for example, for this first demonstration flight, we expect to move forward. We do not expect that to be it's not a condition that all the test flights be successful for us to move forward. We would never make that, because we plan to learn from these, move forward. We're committed to these, both NASA and SpaceX. We would certainly like to achieve launch into orbit, have the Dragon separate, and have a successful or a safe reentry. Those 3 things we would think are key for this demonstration flight. It's definitely a big step above the maiden flight objectives that happened earlier this year. But there's other things that we would like to test out, and we'd like to get data on those things. So I definitely want to de-emphasize the sort of precursor nature of this, or in terms of the overall program. So far, we're on very good track, and we hope to learn a lot from this program again, or this test flight, and continue to move forward, regardless of the outcome.
Bobby?
Bobby Block with the Orlando Sentinel. You've issue and the reason for the delay and what you might need to do, and then I've got a follow-up and a half.
I'll tell you what I can. Keep in mind, I'm sharing pretty preliminary information with you. They did in the inspection of the final closeout photos this morning, sometime after 6 when I landed and before 10 when I woke up. So somewhere in that 4-hour period, they determined that their indications I believe it was in a weld joint, were such that we wanted to take some additional steps, certainly to go ahead and actually look at it. We brought the vehicle down to the horizontal this morning. They did some visual inspection. I believe it's back up vertical now, and they're doing some thrust vector control system wiggles.
What did you see?
I believe it's porosity and potentially cracking. I've not seen anything other than kind of top-level emails in a weld joint.
And again, just to make sure I understand, the earliest is on...
The earliest is Thursday.
And if you have to replace the nozzle, Friday or Saturday?
Friday or Saturday, yeah.
The follow-up for Alan or Phil, given how much of a political hot potato commercial spaceflight has become, and given the success of COTS, I mean, what is your thinking about adapting the model of, not doing the requirements but doing capability for adapting that over for commercial crew, or do you have to go more to a traditional model of requirements, or do you see some kind of in between? And then also, because it's an issue here, there's concern, is the future of the commercial spaceflight program going to be managed out of KSC?
You want me to? Okay. In terms of the first part of the question, I've already forgotten the first part of the question. I was starting to answer the second part.
Whatever you feel.
As a precursor. Right. Yeah. Again, as I said in my intro remarks, the COTS cargo program is one of the programs that we are using as input into the commercial crew program. It has a lot of the features that we want for commercial crew. It allows flexibility. It allows the commercial partners to design the systems with a lot of freedom, and we think those are good things. The cost effectiveness of the program has been a key aspect. It's almost unbelievable that we would get this far for less than a $300 million development effort in 4 years. Both of those things are remarkable and an anomaly in terms of any historical development that I'm aware of in terms of a traditional NASA development. So there's clear things that we would like to incorporate into the commercial crew program. That being said, commercial crew is different than cargo. We're carrying people. There's human spaceflight certification requirements and standards that have to apply. So NASA is still in the process of developing the optimal acquisition strategy for commercial crew. And we're working on that right now, and we hope to be able to get a consensus on that and release that information soon. Probably within the next 6 months, we should have a defined acquisition strategy on commercial crew. So, but there's other features. We were also looking at the Launch Services Program. There's some things that they do very, very well that we could leverage for commercial crew, as well as the Constellation Program. That was the most recent one that we've done for human spaceflight. We learned a lot of things in Constellation Program that we'd like to leverage, and even going back to shuttle. So we're hopefully going to get the best features of all those and design the optimal commercial crew program for what we're trying to do. So right now the cargo program is being managed by Alan, and we don't anticipate changing that model. Alan and his team are at JSC, but they use people from across the agency. For commercial crew, the lead center has been assigned to KSC for commercial crew going forward. And if you've been following the commercial crew program, we currently have a agreement out on the streets, the Commercial Crew Development Round 2 set of agreements. The announcement for proposals were released, and proposals are due in later this month. And when we sign those agreements, they will be managed out of the KSC office.
Irene?
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Reuters and Aviation Week. Gwen, I had a couple questions for you. The first is, what is the targeted altitude for Dragon? And could you please take us through the on-orbit mission objectives? Are you going to be changing orbit, firing thrusters? Like how many times? Just kind of a little, maybe a little play-by-play of what you hope to accomplish in space. And then related to that is, I understand your plan was to cut off your web stream after the rocket goes out of view, which is good for camera people, but for text people, we kind of like insight through the whole process. And are you going to be able to give us any kind of real-time information of how the mission's going? Thanks.
Okay, Irene, your first question was the altitude, 300 kilometers for this particular mission. Your second question was kind of a play-by-play on what we're trying to do with Dragon on orbit. Clearly, we want to separate it from the second stage, have it operate under its own power, do some maneuvering, do telemetry, operate the guidance, navigation, and exercise the guidance, navigation, and control system. This is also in your press packet, by the way. Conduct a deorbit burn, re-enter safely, and then obviously we'd like to pick it up out of the Pacific Ocean as well. And you had a third question on the webcast?
Yes, just as far as if this is going to be transparent to anybody that's following the mission, as far as what you're doing between after a couple of minutes, I guess, after launch until splashdown.
I should defer this question to Kirsten Brost, our communications manager. Our webcasts in the past have shown the orbit insertion. Certainly we did that for the first Falcon 9 flight. I don't know what the plan is for post-Dragon insertion and then splashdown. Our typical is to be pretty open. So let me just follow up with Kirsten, and we'll get back with you before I leave here today, okay? Okay. I think we're pretty public about these things, so we'll see.
Bill?
Bill Harwood, CBS. Well, I'll just follow up on that. You are open, but not in a real-time sense. It's many, many hours after the fact that we find out even basic things about your missions. I mean, hours and hours and hours and hours. Now, I realize that you guys are busy running the mission and, looking at data, but I'm just curious, is that a manpower issue for you? It's obviously philosophical, I would guess, with Elon, the way he wants to run your business. But I think what Irene was asking was real-time real-time data during these missions, and so that people have some idea of what's going on while it's going on. Can you address that? And then I have a question for Phil.
Yeah, let me do my best to help out here. There's no question that we don't have a muzzle on the data by design. In some cases, we have to delay some feed because of ITAR, but we don't want to use that excuse when it's inappropriate. I know on the static fire on Friday, the attempt, we were just I know we were slow in getting out information on Friday. We fixed that on Saturday. I think we got a statement out within just a couple of minutes of the first attempt and the second attempt on Saturday. So we're working it. We don't have, like I say, we don't have a plan to muzzle. So maybe it must be a personnel issue. Or lack of personnel, I should say, not a personnel issue. They're throwing anyone under the bus. And we'll continue to work on it. I mean, we webcast the entire first flight of Falcon 9. That was pretty bold, since history would say that was not going to be a particularly successful flight. So bear with us, be patient. We're not trying to be secretive about this. I don't know about, because we haven't gotten there yet, I don't know about what kind of data is going to be available for the Dragon operations on orbit in real time, but we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. We'll do our best. I hear the criticism, and we'll work it.
And a kind of a related question for Phil. When you're talking about using COTS as a model for commercial crew down the road and how you do that, the same question, a transparency question, when people are involved in it's taxpayer money. I mean, the one complaint I hear about SpaceX is not that the hardware is, anything's wrong with the hardware, it's that and this is from NASA people now, is that they don't have any insight into what's going on. I mean, how much insight does NASA require in the commercial crew world as you proceed forward in terms of the free flow of information, et cetera?
Right, that's another good question. We require as much insight as we need to have confidence that these systems are safe to fly NASA astronauts and NASA-sponsored astronauts on these systems. So there's not a numerical equation associated with that, but we do need significant insight into the true nature of these systems. And right now, the planning that we have done to date, we've released some of that information about how we plan to do the insight oversight. It's still preliminary, and we're still putting the final touches on it, but unquestionably, we are going to want to know very well how these systems perform and operate. And ultimately, at the end of the day, NASA is the one that's going to be providing the certification on these systems for human spaceflight. So again, NASA needs to have sufficient insight so that we have confidence that we can apply that certification successfully. So again, the onus is still on NASA for human spaceflight. A lot of the responsibility is more on our commercial providers in these partnership models in terms of responsibility. But at the end of the day, NASA will still have the responsibility to either certify or not. And in order to do that, we need to have insight. So it's sort of a philosophical answer to your question. We don't have a calculated numerical answer, but we intend to be very, very involved and insightful in our approach.
Well, just a really quick related follow. Are you satisfied that you have the insights you need for COTS? Are you comfortable with the way things are going?
I'll let Alan answer that because he's
in fact,
executing the COTS
I wanted
program.
to clarify your comment that said we don't have insight. And in fact, we do have insight. In fact, since the day we signed the agreement, we've had a team together working very closely with SpaceX, a small team, not the large numbers that you might otherwise think, but we did have a small team providing insight, and we have done that on a daily basis now with SpaceX. And then when we approach the larger milestones, we bring in a larger team and we reach back throughout the agency for the experts we need to review the data packs and evaluate the progress being made with SpaceX. And I have to say, SpaceX has been very open with us on providing all the information we requested and has never hesitated in sharing information with us. So we've had a great partnership in terms of the technical insight, and that has not been a problem for us at all.
James?
James Dean from Florida Today with a question to follow up first for Ms. Shotwell. During the maiden flight, I believe Elon put a percentage guess on the successful flight at something like 70%. What is your percentage guess for this upcoming mission on the chances of a successful flight, fully successful?
Well, history would say that we're going to have a substantial issue in one of the first of the three flights. That's just empirical. It has nothing to do with our process or our hopes. If I want to have a cloud over my head, I'd put the success at the same percentage, 70%. Given that we did successfully get Falcon 9 to orbit on its maiden flight, my guess is it ramped up pretty substantially. But I'm not a statistician, so I don't necessarily want to put a number, but it isn't any lower than 70.
As a follow-up for you and or Mr. Lindenmoyer, specifically when have you targeted the first CRS mission on your manifest? And could you give a numerical confidence level in the chances of meeting that, whatever that current date is? And I'm asking in the context of a couple of things. First, if you listen to the shuttle program guys and all the way up to Mr. Gerstenmaier, there's a lot of messages about likely delays and some pessimism that these flights are actually going to occur late next year, even early 2012. Obviously, therefore, suggesting an extra shuttle flight would be helpful. And in addition, last but not least, would additional COTS funding be essential to making any given schedule?
You take it first. Yeah, we plan on having the next Dragon flight ready in the late spring, early summer of next year. There is a tremendous amount of data exchange and test reviewing that occurs after that. So when the liftoff occurs, it's hard to predict, especially if that vehicle is the one that's going to station. We currently have our first CRS flight scheduled, I believe, late November of next year. Again, I'm not a statistician. I don't want to put a percentage to that, but I can tell you SpaceX is all in on getting Dragon to station next year. There's pessimism. It's a new program. We've experienced delays in the past, but getting Falcon 9 to orbit early this summer was enormously helpful. You take the majority of the launch vehicle questions out, not all, obviously, so it's history. And then now we need to get Dragon flying. So, like I said, we're all in getting Dragon to the station next year, at least once, and hopefully twice.
Okay, here in the back.
So could either of you address whether additional funding, was proposed in the FY11 budget, is necessary, what you would do with it, how helpful it would be to maintain your schedule?
Well, the current program, I believe, is fully executable as we have currently planned. But as you know, starting with the Augustine Commission and then worked its way into the President's budget and now into the NASA authorization bill, discussed adding additional funding to increase the chances of success of these COTS demonstration missions. And we have studied that, and of course NASA believes very strongly in a very robust and comprehensive test program to reduce technical risks in a new development of spacecraft capability like this. So, given the direction to possibly add additional funding, should that be appropriated, we have discussed additional testing with the rendezvous and the radar systems that could reduce some of the risk in the ISS proximity operations. We talk about adding perhaps some thermal vacuum testing of the solar array, which is something that was not currently planned, but that would be a test that would reduce risk in deployment of the solar array, which is necessary for the ISS missions. As well as some additional testing on full Dragon vehicle EMI and EMC testing. So this is the type of thing that we would add should we be provided with additional funding. We do think that would reduce the risk and increase the overall chance of success of these COTS demonstration missions.
And let me just add one thing to that. If we were to add these additional milestones, it's for new content. Again, once we made the decision to extend the life of the space station, again, these cargo resupply services became more important to NASA than ever. So when we looked at the portfolio of capabilities and the risk associated with the COTS, we said for NASA's purposes, we felt like it was in our interest to provide some additional funding for additional milestones. This is new content. It's not cost growth on the original agreements. It's new content. So we're asking our COTS partners, Orbital and SpaceX, for new milestones, new content to be executed to reduce our overall risk. And so I just wanted to make that distinction. It's not for cost growth, it's to reduce NASA's risk associated. And there's risk associated with any development program, so more money is always better. You can always use more money to reduce our risks, but when we decided to increase the life of the space station, that's when we felt like the augmentation milestones would be a good idea. So it was sort of a package in the President's FY11 budget requests, the extension and the augmentation milestones. They were sort of, the philosophy strategically went together.
Okay, I'll come right over here on this side.
It's a question for Phil, but...
Can you give your name, please, and your affiliation?
Sorry, I'm Guillaume Debray with French TV. You've talked about trying to create sort of multiple redundant capabilities to go and have access to ISS. And if we take the milestone of 2020, it's more a macro question. Can you lay out the vision of NASA of what, how open space, access to space should be? What's the best model for you? Do you have a number of many sort of companies you could, bring up cargo or commercial flights up there? And Gwen, if you could project to 2020, where do you think SpaceX should be, or what would you like it to be? Both cargo, commercial, wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, for NASA's purposes, we would like to see an extremely robust U.S. industry and international industry to provide cargo and crew capability to ISS to really maximize the benefit of this very impressive facility. It's been a very strong commitment on the part of the United States and our international partners to get that facility up. It's extremely capable, and we want to get the maximum utility out of that. In order to do that, you need a very robust set of systems to be able to deliver crew and cargo. I think we're well on our way with cargo so far, and I do want to congratulate Alan on the job that he has done. We really didn't know what we were doing when we originally thought of this. We had some ideas, and so far it's been just remarkably successful. So I want to congratulate Alan and also SpaceX again. So I think we're well on our way for cargo delivery services. For crew, we do believe that competition is critical in any services, so we would like to have 2 or more crew capable services in the 2020 timeframe. We'll have to see if that's enabled by the government and commercial market. But ideally, we would like to have routine, cost-effective space transportation services to low Earth orbit by 2020. That's the goal. That's something we've been talking about in the space community for years, and I believe this commercial crew program is the next step to helping make that possible.
Follow up?
It was
For SpaceX,
Okay.
you know.
All right.
Sure. By 2020, we'll be servicing the International Space Station with cargo regularly, hopefully with crew as well. We'll be flying other commercial crewed missions beyond the International Space Station to other destinations in low Earth orbit, and hopefully some bigger things as well. But we certainly want to focus on low Earth orbit cargo and crew.
Okay, right back here in the back.
Jason Ryan with Space Vidcast and Universe Today. I was wondering, given the significance of this first COTS mission, is anything been done to mark either the Dragon or the Falcon 9, or perhaps some kind of little symbolic thing placed inside the Dragon to annotate this first flight?
We've got thousands of patches on Dragon.
Okay, right here.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. Sort of a follow-up to that. Can you talk a little bit about the Dragon's cargo? Does it have ballast to simulate the same type of weight it would have on a supply mission, or additional instrumentation for you to collect on this flight? And I have a follow-up. Thanks.
You know what? I'm going to be guessing here. I think we do have some ballast on this flight, but I want to follow up. I don't want to lead you astray. We do have patches in the Dragon. Let me follow up. I don't want to be wrong on that for you.
And then in regards to recovery operations, can you just describe a little bit about how many ships you'll be deploying, what type of ships they are, where you're staging them, and if you hope to get descent imagery? Are you going to hope to see parachute deploy, or see it lower to the ocean, or just come upon it once it's already in the ocean? Thanks.
That's a lot of detail, and not that I'm not willing to give it. I just don't know if I can give it accurately. Alan, you may know more. We're leveraging both commercial and NASA assets. Alan will probably have more detailed information than I do. I believe we've got 2 boats on the East Coast, 1 boat on the West Coast. We've got a couple of P3 aircraft that we want to cover telemetry of Dragon during reentry. We'll be getting TDRS links as well for telemetry. We're trying to get as much data as we can, obviously. Alan, do you have any follow-up for that?
Well, SpaceX is completely responsible for the recovery and leasing the ships and all the recovery operations for the Dragon, but we, NASA, are providing some Navy P3 aircraft to assist with imagery during the entry, and as well as some telemetry to make sure we get as much information as we can to support this new phase of this demonstration mission.
Dan?
Yes, Dan Billow from WESH-TV. Can I kind of clean up on the end of that question and then ask one of my own? Would we see any of that imagery live on the webcast? The descent?
It won't be available. We won't even have it broadcast at that point.
Okay.
We'll give it out to you specifically.
Question and a follow-up here, if I may. When would the first launch of astronauts be possible? And I know there are no contracts for this yet. So under the best-case scenario, how soon could that be?
2.5 to 3 years after a program is initiated is the earliest possible for astronauts, for SpaceX.
All right. And can you just help me with this launch as far as a cost question? Is it a private/public venture, or is this launch all NASA's money, all COTS money?
Given that this demonstration flight is executed under the COTS program, it is most definitely a public-private partnership. NASA's contributed a total of $278 million. We've spent well over $600 million at SpaceX getting to this point. So from my perspective, it was an incredible investment by NASA. It seems to me it's got to be one of the highlighted success stories of a public-private partnership. Keep in mind, if we overrun this program, we have to come up with the money through investment to cover the costs, which is dramatically different from taxpayers funding cost-type contracts. Whereas if the contractor overruns, taxpayers have to pay the overruns. It's not the case in this for this program, and I think that's exactly why this program was set up that way, to limit the government's exposure.
Yeah, just very quickly, if I may, that 278 is for this mission only.
No, the $278 million is for the development as well as the demonstration flights under the COTS program.
Thank
you. You're right here in the front.
Jim Siegel, Celebration Independent Newspaper. I have a question for Gwen. I was looking at the press release. There's a statement by your CEO, Elon, that says the program will be or make possible a return to the fast pace of progress that took place during the Apollo era. That suggests either the use of proven technology or more efficient processes or shortcuts or something. And I wondered if you could give us some examples of some of the elements of the program that make that kind of statement possible.
Sure. I don't want to get into how other programs are slower than us. I'd rather talk about some milestones that we've hit that have just demonstrated to be faster. For instance, building up the pad at Launch Complex 40. I believe we got the right of entry in October of 2007. We started construction, which means we had our plans approved, and demolition complete, I believe, in May of 2008. And we were ready to accept hardware at the end of 2009. So very rapid development of Launch Complex 40. So that's just one example of how SpaceX has been able to do things very quickly. I don't think there's any single reason why we have. The fact that we do operate in a commercial environment. We don't have to do the Mother May I cycle with a huge number of organizations. We basically have a set of performance requirements that we have to hit specifically for COTS and interfacing with the International Space Station. Those are firm specifications and requirements that we have to meet. How we meet them is up to us. So that cycle of permission and implementation based on permission is cut dramatically short. I don't like to hear the concept of cutting corners. I would never characterize it that way, although obviously folks have used that term before. For Falcon 1 and Falcon 9, we did enormous amounts of ground testing. I don't know anyone that does static fires right now of first stages or second stages. So not only do we acceptance test every component, we've qualified the vehicle as well. So we do acceptance tests of every component, we integrate them onto stages, and we acceptance test the stages. I don't think there's a vehicle flying that does that. So I bristle a little bit at the whole concept of cutting corners. Just because it's faster doesn't mean it's more risky. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ken Chang, New York Times. This is from Ms. Shotwell. After the June flight, Elon suggested that the first demonstration flight would occur at the end of summer. So I was wondering if some of the issues were there issues with the first flight that's like the role of the second stage that were more bigger than the first looked, and whether you could talk about some of the technical challenges that SpaceX encountered and solved in getting ready for the demonstration flight?
Sure. I think we have our FAA report, our closeout report from that flight out on the web. If not, we will get a summary out on the web. The delays from the late summer to now are primarily associated with getting the Dragon spacecraft ready. Falcon 9 has been ready, well, except for obviously the issue we found this morning. Falcon 9 looked to be ready far sooner than now. Dragon is a very complicated spacecraft. It's a spacecraft that's designed to withstand the incredible heating and pressure loads during reentry. It's a very complex propulsion system. We've got 8 monomethylhydrazine and N2O4 thrusters, which are dual redundant. We've got dual redundant drogue parachutes, dual redundant mains, a guidance, navigation, and control system that is designed to keep us in a tight berthing box while the International Space Station arm picks us up. We've got new avionics, new lithium batteries, so it's a very complicated spacecraft, and there's a lot of work to do. And it would be foolish for us to launch that spacecraft sooner than it's ready to go. So we're taking our time on this, and we're willing to take the hits.
Okay, Irene, we're going to take one final question from you, and then we're going to close out.
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Reuters. Gwen, what assurance is there that if you lose control of the Dragon while it's in orbit or on its way to orbit, that it would not threaten any populated areas? What would happen in that scenario if you lost control of it? And could you just talk a little bit about what you needed to demonstrate for the FAA to give you your waiver/license, whatever you ended up getting, for permission to go ahead and fly this thing? Thanks.
Sure. I'm going to have to keep this at a high level because I don't necessarily know all the details. But in order for the FAA to license this launch, this mission, they have to go through the detailed design of both the Falcon 9 and Dragon, analyze the trajectories, run their own risk assessments as to what could happen if we lose control, and that's how we end up with the license, the approval. The process is a painstaking one. It's not like they take their word for what we tell them. They go in and they do their own independent analysis and say that we meet the expected, we meet the criteria to receive an FAA license.
What would happen if you lose control of Dragon?
I believe what would happen is if we lose control of Dragon when it's still attached, we would tumble and break up.
During orbit?
I'm sorry?
While it's in orbit. So in other words, if you don't have a controlled reentry, what would happen with the spacecraft?
Well, hopefully the Dragon will break up if we don't have a controlled reentry.
All right, Gwen, I'm going to let you make some closing comments, and then we're going to close this out.
I think we ended up covering all the points that I wanted to as far as some of the questions that came up. But I did want to close with a huge thanks to NASA. SpaceX would not look like we do today without the support, both the financial and the technical support that we've received from them. They've been a fantastic customer for us. NASA's taken a lot of heat and criticism recently, and I just have to say that the relationship has been extraordinary. I think we've both learned a lot. Both teams have learned a lot, and I just wanted to thank them.
All right, Gwen, thank you very much. Everyone, please watch for any updates that will be issued by NASA and SpaceX in your notes to editors as far as what our plans will be for when the next launch attempt will be and what the plan will be for launch day. And that will conclude this briefing. Thank you very much.